Good morning. So, after learning yesterday the Gemara, which gave us the origins of Kiddush, the pasuk saying Zachar es Yom HaShabbos Lekachay, make mention of the day of Shabbos to sanctify it, and we derived from that two things. From the fact that the Torah says Lekachay to sanctify it, we learned the night Kiddush that when Shabbos starts, you must declare its sanctity. That's the night Kiddush. That's the proper Kiddush. That's the bracha where you actually make mention in a blessing, thank you for Shabbos. But because the Torah inserted the word Yom, day, it didn't have to, but did, indicating to us that you should do something during the day. And the Gemara itself said it wasn't sure at some point, till finally it was clarified because of this whole story of Rav Ashi going to Mechuzah, that all you do is Hagafen, because really the Torah doesn't say to sanctify the day Kiddush. It just sticks the word day in there. So it's kind of like a derivative that tells us do something during the day. So all we do is Hagafen. That's what we learned from the Gemara. So now we're looking at chapter 289 in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which, as you can read, the title says the sequence of the Shabbos morning meal. By see Gimel Sifim, it has 3 halachas, so it's a very short thing. Just the laws of Shabbos morning, Shabbos day Kiddush.
Morning means literally morning.
Means daytime. Morning means here daytime. He calls it here morning meal as opposed to the late afternoon meal, which is Shalosh Shabbos. So you have the night meal, Friday night. You have the morning meal because it follows your morning davening. And then you have the afternoon meal because it follows your afternoon davening. That's why it calls it morning meal. We would call it lunch. But hypothetically, if you're davening early in the morning and you're done davening by 10 o'clock in the morning, it's morning. And in many communities, that happens. There are people who are at their Shabbos afternoon lunch, at their Shabbos afternoon nap before midday. Well, we're just getting started. Yeah, okay. So it says Alter Rebbe, Aleph. I'm reading in the Hebrew, but you can follow along in the English. The Shabbos Shachris, on Shabbos morning, on Shabbos day, as he returns home from shul, the synagogue, his table should be set, and a covering spread over the bread. Is for the reasons explained in 271. In 271, which is the laws of Kiddush, that's the big chapter we're going to get to. But there he explains that during Kiddush, your challah should be on the table, but already covered, as we know, right? The challah should be covered for reasons of not to embarrass the challah when you're making Kiddush, but it still should be on the table, reminding us of the manna, which was wrapped in dew. Right? We'll get to that when we learn that chapter. So likewise, Shabbos day should be this way. And the bed upon which he eats mutzas yafa should be set out very nicely. He's talking about the old day where they sat in a divan, but nowadays it would mean just have your table set. So the salah, just like the night meal. Why? Because honoring the day with a meal is more, takes precedence over honoring the nighttime with a meal. Right? So the day meal should be set at least as nice as the night before because it's meant to be the nicer meal. Notice the language. When you come home from shul, your table should be set. Not when you get home from shul, set your table. But when you come home from shul, your table should be set. And the same thing is true Friday night. It's part of the halacha. The proper way to do it is when you come home, you're coming home like a king to a Shabbos meal in which the table's already set. It doesn't mean that your wife has to do it before you get home. It also could mean that you do it before you leave for shul. But there is this idea the table should be set at least some, it's basic. He says here, your table with a tablecloth and a challah covered. So at least the basic before you leave to shul, put down the challah cover the challah, and you come home like your meal is waiting for you. It's part of it. It should be there when you get home, yeah. That's the way he puts it here. Right? The table should be set already. And the same thing is true Friday night. When he comes home, the table should be set. That's the way it ought to be. Of course, shalom bayis takes precedent. So don't go home and say to your wife, Rabbi Levi said you have to have table set. Don't you dare let me come home without the table set. Calm down. You could do it yourself. Or if it doesn't happen, it's okay. Don't bite anybody's head off. But just note the halachic language that this is the way it ought to be, that the table should be set when a person gets home. This is both true Friday night and Shabbos day.
So the best thing to do is when we're here,
Before you leave,
when we're here for the Kiddush,
yeah,
take 2 rolls, cover them.
you're talking about if you're having lunch in shul.
Yeah.
Well, when you come into the shul, when you come into the social hall, the table's set already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take 2 rolls.
Cover it, yeah.
Cup of wine.
That's it, yeah. We're talking about when you get home here. If you're doing lunch at home, your meal at home, the table's supposed to be set when you get home. At least the challah cover. The challah and the challah cover there. Okay, base. So that's about the meal. I guess the primary feature here is the meal, not the kiddush. The primary kiddush is the night before. The main feature here is the meal. And the day meal, as we just learned, if you learned from the Gemara, actually takes precedence over your night meal. Therefore, Tiknu Chachamim, our sages established L'kadesh al hayayin, to recite kiddush on wine, koidim sudas shachas, before you begin your meal in the morning, kamoi koidim sudas laila, just as you would before your night meal. So this is what the Gemara said. You'll remember yesterday the Gemara didn't give a reason, but I shared with you the reasons that the Alter Rebbe cites here from the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, which is because the day meal takes precedence over the night meal, and therefore, if he doesn't recite kiddush during the daytime meal over wine, then he will have treated his night meal more preciously than his day meal. If I make kiddush over wine at night, I begin my meal that way, and then Shabbos day I don't begin my meal that way, then it's as if I'm treating my night meal more beautifully than my day meal, and therefore I should make kiddush by day. So the kiddush by day is only to satisfy the fact that Shabbos, the day meal, is of higher importance than the night meal, but not because I need to sanctify the day. I already sanctified it last night. So now we're understanding more as to why all you have to do is make prayer gafen. Which is what he says. Nevertheless, even though we're staying here, that the sages wanted you to give that honor of the day meal to give it kiddush, nonetheless, like you don't have to make the whole bracha of sanctification as you did the night before. It's enough just to make prayer gafen.
That's why,
Right? That he makes the bracha over wine. And here's something interesting language, which is not directly derived from the Gemara, but somewhat. And when we get to the Tosfos next week, you'll see a little bit more about this. But he says, Kadeshi, why is he only making hagafen? So till now we understood why is he only making hagafen? Because really he doesn't need to make kiddush. Because he doesn't really need to make kiddush. Right? Because all he has to do is really honor the day meal. The meal. Doesn't really need to make kiddush. But nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe is still not satisfied with this. And presumably he's not satisfied with this because, well, the night kiddush, to a large degree, is also a rabbinic enactment. Over wine certainly is only a rabbinic enactment, right? So if the sages want to honor your day meal, just like it does the night meal, they could have instituted that you make the full kiddush day also. They have that power to institute making blessings. They do it all the time. Almost every blessing we make is rabbinically enacted. So they could have also done the same thing and said, make full Kiddush Shabbos day to give that day meal the honor. And if the Alter Rebbe adds the following, I'm reading this into the Alter Rebbe, but you'll see in a second why. He adds the following. Kadesh yeh heker. The sages did not go so far as to institute the full Kiddush Shabbos day, even though they wanted you to have Kiddush Shabbos day to honor the day meal, but they didn't want to give you the whole full Kiddush because there should be a heker, there should be a distinction. Shekiddush zeh any element of that today's Kiddush is less than the night Kiddush. How so? Because the day Kiddush is only rabbinic.
Where does this all came come in?
All right, you said there's an
So what, well, we'll get to that in a second. But now what we're learning is that the Kiddush is essentially hagafen, right? So one second, what did he just say? Listen to the words he just said again, and let's see what we can deduce from this. Again, eladai beberches peragafen. It's enough just to say peragafen. Sheyivarech alayayin. He makes blessing over the wine for the day. Kedei sheyeheker bezeh shekiddush zeh in the middle of a surfing, so that there be an indication that today's Kiddush is only rabbinic. Unlike what?
hold on a second. Last night was also.
Seemingly, it seems like what he's saying is, unlike last night, which wasn't rabbinic.
You said there's a.
But isn't last night rabbinic also?
Allusion to Torah.
Oh, so there has to
Because
be.
of the word sanctify.
So let's see the footnote here. But basically, what Alter is telling us is, on the one hand, the sages are telling you we want you to honor the day meal and therefore do Kiddush like the night before. But we don't want you to do it the same way you do it the night before. Then you're going to conflate that the two are of the same standing, and they're not, because last night was much more important.
Which part? I thought the meal get Shabbos day is more.
But the night Kiddush is more important.
So the
You're-
Kiddush is more
That's right.
important.
So the night Kiddush is more important, because that's when you sanctify the day in the beginning. The day meal is more important. So because the day meal is more important, we want you to begin with a cup of wine, so you don't give more honor to the night meal.
So it's like
Right.
no meal, Kiddush.
Right. So in other words, I want you to begin your day meal with a cup of wine. Otherwise, your night meal would have had more honor with a cup of wine at the beginning. But if I make you say the full Kiddush on your day meal, you will make the mistake of thinking that your day Kiddush is equal to your night Kiddush, and it's not. And therefore, we're going to cut out the main Kiddush part of your day meal so that you know this is not the same Kiddush as the night before. I'm only doing it because the day meal is more important, not because the Kiddush is more important. But nonetheless, we're stuck with this issue that the Alter makes it sound as if the day meal, the day Kiddush is rabbinic, as opposed to the night meal, which is not rabbinic. Isn't the night meal, night Kiddush also rabbinic? So let's see footnote number 6. Yeah. It's in the back there. It should be the last page. Second to last page. Footnote 6. You see it? You have it, Alan? One second before I go to this, Alan, you want to say something?
Yeah, where's the Al-Kain come in?
It's custom we'll get to after. These are customs that we add. We'll get to it in a second. Okay. The Alter Rebbe's statement requires some clarification. For the recitation of Kiddush at night is also a rabbinic ordinance. There is, however, a difference between the two. For there is a scriptural obligation to sanctify the Shabbos as at its commencement. Our sages' ordinance formalized that obligation through the recitation of Kiddush over wine. The recitation of Kiddush by day, by contrast, is entirely rabbinic. So let's get this clear. There's two elements to Kiddush. One explicitly in the verse, one not explicitly in the verse. Element number 1 of Kiddush is making a bracha, sanctifying the day. That's explicit in the verse. The Torah says, make mention of the day to sanctify it. Make mention of the day to sanctify it. Without the wine. So that part, even if it's not a direct biblical commandment, say like put on tefillin, but it certainly has much stronger legs in its rabbinical or in its biblical origin. Then there is tier 2 of your Kiddush, which is that recitation, which the Torah just said you should do it while you're holding a cup of wine. That's completely rabbinic. Now, the daytime meal has neither of these two features. It's not a Kiddush because you've already sanctified it last night, and therefore it's not wine over Kiddush. So what's the only thing here? It's the sages telling you to treat your Shabbos day meal with the same honor the night before. By holding a cup of wine at the beginning. The nighttime meal is honored by the fact that you began it with like a declaration over wine. So make a declaration over wine, but not Kiddush because you did that already, and that was almost biblical. Follow? And so that in order for us to understand and know that the daytime Kiddush is not really a Kiddush of any biblical standing, therefore we took the Kiddush entirely out and just held the cup of wine for Agafen, and that way your meal begins with a graced cup of wine as the night before did, even though, hey, you didn't make Kiddush. Clear? It's interesting. Yeah? So now, 1 second. Since you're asking about the Al-Kain appears in the Siddur, not in the Shulchan Aruch. There's a code of, remember the difference between a Siddur and a code. Code of Jewish law tells you what you have to do, what you don't have to do. A Siddur formalizes what you do without giving you the background of what your obligations are and what your obligations are not. It's just formalized it. So customs that have emerged will also be in the Siddur without like distinction almost between what's halacha and what's custom. Because it's just giving you a formalized text of what you should do, right? Taking into consideration all the enactments and all the, but the Shulchan Aruch is telling you what the law. What's the law? The law is hold a cup, make a Agafen, right? And that's what you did done. But by custom, he put it into this. Let's see the language of the Siddur with respect to Kiddush. I didn't look it up before. Let's see if there is something here that will help us answer your question. See, meaning sometimes out there have inserts like instructions into the Siddur, which are printed in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, of the new editions of the Shulchan Aruch, the old editions also actually. Let's see. I don't see anything. I don't see anything here. Siddur Mincha Shabbos, Kabbalah Shabbos, B'Shachas Kedem Boru, B'Yochid Tfilas Arvis Minhag, Ba'omer K'Shavei Shach. Oh, all he says is, oh no, that's Friday night. No, no comment. No comment. I don't see any comment from the Siddur about Kiddush. Okay, we have a little homework just to go and do an investigation as to where this custom comes from, when it started and how it started and where it evolved from. I don't see any comment here.
So basically, you just get away with saying.
As far as the law goes, all you have to do is Ber Gofen, that's correct. As far as the strict law goes, as far as strict halacha. Okay, I have to look up the. I think I know where to start.
What's the?
My great grandfather wrote a book of commentary, and I'll never sit there. I'm gonna look it up there. We'll start over there. This great grandfather is also there, but his great grandfather, I think. Shara Kailo is the name of the book. Okay, I'll have to look it up, and then we'll get back to you. Where that whole that couple evolved. Yeah, what do you say?
What's the example?
Wants to know where the stuff we say before Haggafa and Shabbos morning, Shabbos lunch. Those paragraphs which conclude with Al Kain, like where it came from, how it started. But clearly, it's not halacha; it's custom, right? Because we're learning halacha is just Haggafa. Okay, continues Al Terebe. The Komukam, nonetheless, even though I just finished learning the second paragraph of number 2, halacha 2. Now, the Komukam, nevertheless, even though we just finished learning that the kiddush here is not really a real kiddush. It's just that your meal get the honor of beginning with a graceful cup. Nonetheless, Gam Zeh Kiddush, this kiddush too, this non-kiddush kiddush, has the same laws of the night kiddush, and therefore must be in the place of the meal. Right? This is one of the halachas we learned earlier, that the kiddush requires that it be done in the presence of the meal. Right? And to make this clear, although we clarified this in previous Yoreh classes, that the law is not that your meal requires a kiddush, but your kiddush requires a meal. Otherwise, your kiddush will not be valid. But over here, it works like in bi-directional. Your meal is what's causing you to have kiddush, because you have to have your day meal have the same honor as your night meal. Now, in order to fulfill your obligation of that kiddush, you have to do it in the presence of your meal. Just like your Friday night kiddush has to be done in the presence of your meal. So all the laws that we said there apply here. Likewise, and that you may not eat anything before you make kiddush, just as Friday night. Just like the Friday night kiddush, where you may not eat before you make kiddush. But there's one leniency. You may drink water before tefillah shachris, before you daven shachris. Because, well, actually less than that, a little different, because your obligation for kiddush hasn't come yet. Right? So here's this is always that principle that when an obligation descends upon a person or is manifest on a person, the person may not eat anything until he's fulfilled that obligation. Right? You wake up in the morning on Sukkot, you can't eat until you shake Lulav Nesrik. You wake up in the morning on Hashanah, you can't eat until you hear shofar. Now you wake up in the morning, before we get to Chabad custom, the halacha is you may not eat until you daven, because you have an obligation to daven. But you may drink water before you daven. Right? Again, before we get to Chabad custom. So wait a second, please. So we're going to build our case.
Wait a second, please.
Yeah. So again,
Mister.
You wake up in the morning, you have an obligation to daven. You may not eat or drink before you daven, but you may drink water before you daven. Now, here in this case, when it comes to kiddush, Friday night kiddush, you may not even drink water before you make kiddush. So maybe the same rule applies to the day kiddush. You may not even drink water until you make kiddush. And the answer is yes, you may not drink water until you make kiddush. But before shachris, before my morning davening, which on an ordinary day, I'm allowed to drink water before I daven shachris. But here today on Shabbos morning, I have two things in front of me. I have Shachris. As far as that's concerned, I'm allowed to drink water, but I have Kiddush coming up. And as far as that's concerned, I may not drink water. So maybe because my Kiddush is coming after Shachris, therefore even before Shachris, I can't drink water. To which the Alter Rebbe says, no, you may drink water before your Shachris, even though your Kiddush is following Shachris. Why is that? Because your obligation for Kiddush didn't come to you yet. It only comes to you after you daven. How did the halacha begin? When a person comes home from shul, his table should be set, and then he makes Kiddush. So which means until I'm done Shachris and go home, there's no obligation for Kiddush upon me, and therefore I may drink water before Shachris. Clear? That's what he says here. We clear on that? In other words, sorry?
What happens to that saying that the other always says, it's better to eat?
Again, you said that's Chabad custom, which is post halacha. That's a bad word, but after the halacha we just described. So what I just described was the basic halacha, which most Jews would follow outside of Chabad. Yeah. So now let's look at footnote 10 to incorporate Chabad custom into this. Okay.
Just as far as after you've done Shachris.
Now the obligation for Kiddush. That's correct.
So,
Before you daven Shachris, there's no Kiddush obligation on you. And therefore, the only thing preventing you
but
from
if you
eating or
wanted to eat, you have to make Kiddush.
what's that? No,
Even before Shachris.
not necessarily.
Really? Some people, I heard that if you're going to eat, you have to make Kiddush.
Okay, I want to leave that alone for now.
Fine. Okay.
But the answer to that in very short is no.
No.
If you always have a meal after Shachris, and you have a set time for davening Shachris, then the obligation for Kiddush does not come upon you until you daven Shachris. Someone who has no set time for daven Shachris, let's say a woman, who isn't obligated necessarily to daven Shachris at a certain time, but she davens once during the day at some point, so it's possible that for her, she'd have to make Kiddush before she eats, before Shachris in the morning.
Kind of like
Because her obligation for Kiddush happens right away, considering that she has no set time for Shachris. There is that possibility. But nonetheless, nowadays, especially if the woman goes to shul every week, then her obligation for Kiddush only comes after she davens. So, for the most part, that's a moot issue. There is that discussion. Okay, so now let's get to the Chabad custom. Yeah? So again, as far as the halacha is concerned, when I wake up in the morning, I may not eat until I daven. I may drink water. And then for Shabbos morning, I can drink my water before Shachris, even though after Shachris, I will not be able to drink water until I make Kiddush. That's because my Kiddush obligation only comes to me after I daven Shachris. Before I daven Shachris, there's no Kiddush obligation. So the only thing preventing me from eating is Shachris. And Shachris, I'm allowed to drink before Shachris. That's the halach. And if I could drink water. Now comes Chabad custom in footnote 10. Yeah? In section 89.5, the Alter Rebbe explains that since the Kiddush, in section 89.5, the Alter Rebbe explains that since the Kiddush must be recited in the place of one's meal, I think it should say 189. I don't know, I have to look it up. Because Kiddush must be recited in the place of one's meal, it is forbidden to eat a meal before prayer. The obligation to recite Kiddush does not become incumbent on a person before prayer. Accordingly, there is no difficulty in drinking water. Right? That's the conundrum I was referring to. So as stated in that source, it is forbidden to eat or drink other beverages before praying in the morning, other beverages other than water. Nevertheless, as stated in the notes to that ruling, based on Hayom Yom entry 10 Shvat and other sources, it has become Chazidic custom to eat and drink or drink lightly before prayer in order to pray with the appropriate concentration. Alan, that's the point, yeah. And therefore, your water, the halacha here regarding water, would apply to your mezainis before davening and your coffee. Yeah,
You're saying Chabad is the only one.
I think other Hasidic circles do it also. I don't think Chabad is the only one.
Must be some support somewhere.
Okay, that it's been written. Add. What's the word? Add. Yeah, there's and lots of ink has been poured over the halachas of the permissibility within Chabad and within other Hasidic circles to eat before davening.
I'm just
not for
asking
our-
from an academic point of view, not-
Yeah, there's a yeah, from a purely halachic academic
Where the
point of view.
source comes from, the
Yeah.
education.
Yeah, so from the purely halachic and academic point of view, there's a beautiful 30-page article written by Rabbi Rappaport in England, in which he goes through all the sources, it breaks it all down, and explains the halachic legs upon which this custom is built. But at the end of the day, as a chassid, I have full confidence in the Rebbe's ability to understand halacha better than mine, and thus if he says eat before davening, eat before davening. But again, it's only a light Even though I had a Rosh Yeshiva who used to say you can even be more, but I'll leave that alone for now. Okay, so he continues. Karen Ledovit likens a person who eats before prayer on Shabbos in order to heighten his concentration to one who must eat on Yom Kippur. A person who has to eat on Yom Kippur because he's sick, who does not recite Kiddush. Because why is he eating? Because he needs he needs that, not because he's eating a meal, because he needs it to be able to survive.
It's life sustaining.
Right, so here too, the Chabad Chassid's intention in eating a little mazonos and coffee before davening is that during davening he can focus. So therefore, there's no reason for Kiddush before that. It's more akin to the water that he permits. Yeah, the latter ruling is echoed by other authorities in the common practice, and is the common practice in the Lubavitch community. So there we have it. Okay. The Yesh Omrim, others say, continue back to the main text, the third paragraph of Halacha 2. The Yesh Omrim, we might say, some say, that you're allowed to eat before Kiddush, before Shabbos day Kiddush, because it doesn't have the same stringency as the night before. Even after you finish davening, right? As he says in footnote 11, even after you finish davening.
It's a non-Kiddush.
And it's non-Kiddush Kiddush. As he says, because its whole entire foundation is only rabbinic. Unlike the Shabbos Friday night Kiddush, that over wine is rabbinic, but the actual recitation of declaring the day has very strong biblical legs. But the morning day Kiddush is completely rabbinic, just to honor the meal. And therefore you can eat before, no problem. And therefore, we're not so strict about. And therefore, this opinion is that we're not so strict to hold to prevent you from eating before Kiddush. And therefore, you can rely on this opinion when the circumstances are difficult. What does it mean, circumstances are difficult? He has no wine at present, and he has no wine of the region. He has no beer or some other drink that would qualify for Kiddush. Not available. And and he has no bread. So he can eat other foods before Kiddush. Because to begin with, there's an opinion that says you're allowed to. And therefore you can rely on that opinion if you're hungry and there's no wine or Kiddush available, there's no bread. Even though he's expecting that sometime soon, later in the afternoon, wine will be made available for him. So he'll drink the wine then and wash then, but he's hungry now. Okay, so have your chicken, have your kugel, have your cholent. There's no need to wait. So he says. But if he does have bread, so then he has to make Kiddush over the bread before he eats the rest of the food. Because there are those that say, because in the first instance, one may make Kiddush on bread. This is something we're going to get to in that big chapter. No, in 272, the chapter after the big chapter I keep referencing, there he discusses the wine that's required for Kiddush. And there he says that one opinion says, the different opinions, but one opinion says that if you have no wine, you make Kiddush on bread. There are others that say that if you enjoy bread more than you enjoy wine, to begin with, you should make Kiddush on bread. So because there is such an opinion, if you have bread and you don't have wine, then you must make the Kiddush on bread before you eat the rest of your food. And what's the Kiddush by Shabbos day? What's the Kiddush by Shabbos day? What bracha are you making on the Kiddush Shabbos day? Only agafen. So what bracha would you be making on your Kiddush on bread on Shabbos day? Just hamaitzi. That's the whole thing. So in other words, just start off with your bread. If you have bread, wash, then go say all those customary things, al kain, and then hamaitzi. That's not an interruption because it's part of your Kiddush. You're not allowed to make an interruption between your washing and your eating. This does not constitute an interruption. Correct? It's part of your meal. It's part of your Kiddush process. So you wash, sit down by your table, take out the whole thing, read the whole business, pick up your challah, al kain berach, eat your bread. That was your Kiddush, and now enjoy the rest of your meal. But you must do that if you have bread available.
Versus wine.
And you have no wine. But if you have no wine and no bread, and you're hungry, you can eat, even though it's before Kiddush, because again, the Shabbos day Kiddush is not of the same standing as a Friday night Kiddush when it would be forbidden to do so. Continues, if he has wine of the region, he has beer or some other alcoholic beverage or some other beverage that would be kosher for Kiddush, even though he doesn't have wine, then, because he has the possibility of making a proper Kiddush, he shouldn't eat anything. Afilu pas, he shouldn't even eat bread. before he makes the kiddush, which is basically the baruch shahakal on that cup.
Orange juice considered one of those.
I don't think so. It's again one of the things that are discussed at length if orange juice counts. So I think the way also questionable. The way to think about it is, one of the ways to think about it is, would you invite someone to your house, someone of stature to your house for that beverage? You're not going to invite someone over for a glass of juice, but you will invite someone over for a coffee. You will invite someone over for a beer or a whiskey. That's something you will invite someone over. So that's one way to think about it, but there are others. Okay, let's conclude. Halachas Gimel. This is very interesting. Finally, Aval Balayla. We'll conclude the whole chapter here. Aval Balayla, but at nighttime, if he doesn't have any wine, and he doesn't have wine of the region, he doesn't have beer or whiskey or something like that, and he doesn't have any bread to make kiddush. So he has no object upon which to make kiddush. By the day meal, we said, go ahead and eat, because the day kiddush is not as important. But your Friday night kiddush is seriously important. It's got almost biblical legs. Maybe not the wine part, but the blessing part. And even the wine part, as we'll learn from Tosfos, has some biblical legs. And therefore, and he's expecting that at one point during the nighttime, bread's going to be coming, wine or beer is going to be coming. I'll have that at some point. Don't eat anything. From other foods, until something is brought to him that he can recite kiddush over, either challah or wine or beer. So how long should you wait till the morning? No. He should wait akapanim at the very least until midnight. So you have to wait till midnight before you eat, if you're expecting it to come. I mean, if you know that nothing's coming, then why wait until midnight? No options coming. But if you think that something might come later, then wait for that to arrive, something upon which you can make kiddush, and wait all the way till at least even till midnight. But if he's not expecting anything to come, then okay, go ahead and eat without kiddush. You're not required to spend your night in fasting on Shabbos, just because you need to make kiddush over wine or bread. Why, Alan? Why? Because the biblical kiddush. Because the primary biblical kiddush you've already fulfilled in your ma'ariv. If your biblical kiddush was on wine, then we would tell you, sorry, sir, fast if you have no kiddush. But because the primary biblical kiddush is not in the wine, it's on the recitation of the declaration of Shabbos, the sanctification, and you've done so in your Friday night service. You've already declared for the Shabbos holy. So your primary biblical kiddush you've done already in your ma'ariv, in your davening. But your kiddush over wine or bread is somewhat biblically supported, let's say, and therefore, if you think wine or bread's coming, wait for it. Don't eat yet. Only till midnight. You're not expecting it at all. Eat right away because your biblical kiddush you've done already. But your Shabbos day meal, if you're hungry, no need to wait for your kiddush to arrive, because to begin with, it's a very not tenuous but very light rabbinical enactment to give your Shabbos day meal that honor, and therefore no need to wait for kiddush if it's not available to you. So here we have the halachas of Shabbos day kiddush, and God willing, after Shabbos, we will look at the Tosfos that we mentioned yesterday, which will give us more detail about the structure of kiddush, including Vayichulu and why that's there, and that will help us understand more context of our kiddush as it's derived from the halachic kiddush of the Gemara, and then we'll continue the Gemara's discussion and come back to the Shulchan Aruch as we need. Have a wonderful day, Yidden, and a good Shabbos.
Small clarification.
Yeah.
Your double Shabbos,
Yeah.
and makes it.
Correct.
That's because even if it's 2 hours or 10 minutes, it doesn't matter.
Because your obligation for kiddush is set upon you as soon as you're done shachris, and therefore once you have an obligation upon you, you're not supposed to eat anything until you fulfill that obligation. That's the basic reason.
Once you've done your obligation.
For kiddush, it rests upon you, manifests on you, and once an obligation manifests on you, you may not eat or drink until you fulfill that obligation. But because that obligation is so light, if you're not expecting the wine or kiddush to be available for the next 3 hours and you're hungry, eat without it. That's what he's saying. But again, if you have beer, then make kiddush on beer. If you have bread, make Kiddush on bread.
But there's always musaf.
Okay, your musaf is not really what brings the obligation of Kiddush upon you. It's Shachris that does, as we're learning here.
Theoretically, after
That's right. You could have musaf later.
That's when the Kiddush part.
that's why somebody has to make it.
The Kiddush part.
Correct. Someone has to make Kiddush by the Kiddush club.
Technically over, right?
Correct.
At that point.
Correct.
After
Your Kiddush
Achshar.
club, which happens after Shachris, must have a Kiddush before you do eat or drink anything, because you've davened Shachris and the obligation for Kiddush is rested upon you. We so happen to delay it till after musaf, but your obligation still rests upon you as soon as you've davened Shachris. Musaf and Shachris don't have to be davened. Don't have to be davened back to back. We do just out of convenience because we're all together. Might as well have a minion together. But in theory, you can divide it, Shachris and Musaf.
The obligation that's set upon you that set
For Kiddush, that's correct.
is what prompted me to ask, because we're not doing this till 12:30, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, although he does say when you,
Theoretically, we should be sitting down, theoretically.
although he does say at the beginning, right? In the morning when you come home from shul, you're coming home from shul when? After musaf. That's when your table should be set. But again, that's a convenience more than there's a required halacha. Okay, the laws of musaf and when you can have musaf and whether you're allowed to delay musaf, that's already another subject. But at least hypothetically, it's separate from shachas. Okay. Okay, wonderful day, Eden. Good Shabbos.
Is it probably a rare case of someone who doesn't make Kiddush at night, for whatever reason, fell asleep, needs to do it in the day?
Okay, we're gonna get to that
We're
also.
gonna get to that?
Yeah, the Gemara is gonna get to that, and we'll get to that. Yes, it's gonna be because the Gemara is gonna get to delaying Ma'ariv to Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then it's gonna get to right, which the Gemara earlier connected to missing Kiddush Friday night, right?
Oh, Havdalah.
Havdalah, I'm sorry, when you forget Havdalah Saturday night, you do it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, which the Gemara connected to a person who forgot Kiddush Friday night and does it the next day.
It always seems to parallel.
Correct. So the Gemara is actually first gonna get. It's gonna be the next subject in the Gemara. That's gonna be the next subject in the Gemara. So we'll get to those halachas as well. Okay, wonderful day, Eden.
Are we done?
Yeah, I'm done with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.